Is faith a delusion? That's certainly an accusation I sometimes hear from my atheist friends, implying that my Christian faith, and in fact anyone who holds a religious belief, does so because they're deluded. So, what can we say by way of response? Well, the first thing I say to atheist friends who suggest that faith is delusional is I like to sometimes gently point out the fact that the majority of people in the world today, and certainly through human history, have had a religious faith. If you look at the statistics for what people believe, atheists continue today to be a relatively small minority. Now, of course, numbers don't prove truth, but it definitely would suggest to you that I think if you're an atheist watching this, perhaps a little bit of humility is required, because sure, it's certainly possible that you as the minority are right and the vast majority are wrong, but unless you've actually done the work to prove that, simply saying, oh, the majority are deluded, especially when the majority of people who hold a religious faith live in the southern hemisphere and live in non-Western contexts, makes you look arrogant, makes you look completely full of yourself, and makes you quite frankly look like a Western imperialist. So maybe a little bit of humility might be required. But well, the next thing we might say, though, to the faith is a delusion accusation is, if that's the case, it's odd that the studies that have been done of religious faith show that having a religious faith has a whole series of wellness outcomes, well-being outcomes. And psychiatrists and psychologists have studied this for decades. One of the most famous ones is concerning bereavement. If you go through bereavement, if you lose somebody close to you, a friend or a spouse or a parent, it's been shown in study after study after study that having a religious faith, a deep faith in God of some kind, means you will probably come through that process of bereavement in a far more robust and helpful way than people who don't come from a faith-based background. And as I say, multiple studies have shown this to be the case. But still, my atheist friends could say, look, even though we're outnumbered, even though the majority of people in the world are not atheists, even though, sure, faith may have all of these kind of outcomes attached to it, that doesn't prove that it's true. And to my atheist friends, I would say I completely, entirely agree with you. I am not a Christian because the majority of people in the world believe in God. I am not a Christian because believing in God produces all kinds of benefits for me. The primary reason I am a Christian is I have considered and weighed the evidence, and I believe it to be true. And this is the only way, ultimately, when atheists and Christians engage with each other, I think, to move forward in helpful ways, is to actually talk about the evidence for Christianity, the evidence for atheism, and see where the balance of the evidence lies. And I firmly believe that when you weigh up the bulk of the evidence from philosophy, the evidence from science, the evidence from ethics, and primarily too the evidence from history, from the life, the ministry, the death, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, I believe the evidence stacks up powerfully in favour of the Christian faith. And to friends who are watching this who don't have a faith, whether you're an outright skeptic or agnostic who's thinking about these things, one of my questions to you would be, have you put your own lack of faith, your own worldview commitments as an atheist to the test? It's very easy to sit there and lob bricks at what other people believe. It's much harder to defend what you believe and actually think it through and examine it with careful scrutiny. And that's what I did when I became a Christian in my late teens, and I believe back then that the evidence was tremendous. Since then, I've devoted my adult life and my academic life to studying and investigating the evidence for the Christian faith, and I believe it grows stronger and stronger the more you do that. So why not give Christianity a go? Why not read one of the books we've recommended on the Solas blog? Why not check out the Short Answers video series, of which this is just one video? We have lots of videos looking at different evidences why Christianity is true, and why not give it a serious look? Because otherwise, if you're an atheist who simply repeats sound bites like faith is a delusion, and you haven't even bothered thinking about it, then quite frankly, you risk being deluded yourself.